Today's show is brought to you by betonline.ag. Go to clnsmedia.com/Goodman. Use the promo code CLNS50 for a 50% bonus on your next deposit. Welcome to another edition of the Good and Plenty Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Goodman. Thanks for joining me. As always, we got another great show for you today. It's a college hoops version with some of the news that came out this week involving UConn headed back to the Big East, Florida landing the top transfer on the market this year and what this does to the Gators. We'll talk about the preseason top 25, a little NBA draft as well with none other than NBC's Rob Dauster. Remember, please subscribe to the Good and Plenty podcast. We got NBA, we got college. We even will have some grassroots stuff this summer for sure. You can do that wherever you listen to your podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher. You can find me at Goodman Hoops on Twitter for sure, and I'm sure I'll annoy you on Twitter plenty. You can also find me at CLNS Media and at WatchStadium.com, where I'll have the Pac-12 Chain of Command out later today. It is on, Thursday? Actually, we'll have it on Friday before I head overseas for about 10 days on the weekend. So there probably will not be a podcast next week, even with NBA free agency going on. But who knows? Maybe I'll call in and try to put something together, depending on what's going on there. But again, this is a College Hoops edition. We'll talk some UConn. We'll talk some Florida, SEC, preseason expectations, and we'll do that right now with none other than Rob Dauster. Now pleased to welcome back. He didn't get a call for a while, but we're going to bring him back in an off-season college hoops pod here, and it is none other than NBC's Rob Dauster. Robert, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. You caught me at a good time right in between nap sessions for my 3-month-old daughter. So
I thought it was your nap sessions.
No. Well, I do need a nap, man. She doesn't like to sleep all that much. But full disclosure for people that don't know, Goodman's asked me to come on like 5 times in the last month, and I just keep saying no to him. So I finally felt bad and figured maybe I should throw him a bone and come back on and give him a little bit of help. So
this is a flat out lie, but what is not a lie is the fact that I did not have a second child. Largely because my only child, my daughter, who's now 15, did not sleep until she was about 2.5 years old.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, man, it's good practice for college basketball season when we don't sleep at all anyway. So
Good point, no doubt. All right, so let's start with really 2 big storylines this week that led me to bring you back on board here. And number one, UConn, back to the Big East. I don't think anybody would disagree that this is the right move for everybody involved. Big East to bring back UConn, for UConn to get back in the Big East instead of being the AAC. I know a lot of critics are like, well, UConn sucked in the AAC. What leads them to believe they're going to be good in the Big East? Well, I'll go with Danny Hurley. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big difference between having Danny Hurley and the coach that drove the program into the ground. And, you know, I'm not the biggest fan of Kevin Ollie when it comes to his coaching ability, but I do think it's important to note that, one, he did win a national title with UConn, and, like, we can't just ignore that. He won a national title.
Thanks, Shabazz Napier.
As a member of the AAC as well.
Yep.
And, like, I do think part of the reason that UConn kind of it contributed to what happened with Kevin Ollie is that they're playing in a conference where, like, their league rivals are Tulane and SMU and East Carolina. And, you know, when you are recruiting against that, it's much easier to say, yeah, UConn isn't what they were before. Look at the conference that they're in. They're the 7th best league. The league is barely high major. You're going to be playing against teams you don't want to play against. You got to go to Texas 3 or 4 times during the season just to play road games. So I don't think that it can be ignored, the fact that people could use that against them in recruiting, just basically say, like, UConn is not what they were before. And now that they're back in the Big East, you know, I know the Big East isn't what it was in its heyday 10 years ago, but I do think that it is a better league with more traditional rivalries and a little bit less, headaches when it comes to traveling. Like all
fits,
that stuff, man. It fits better, and like they're home.
Right.
I mean, I grew up on Big East basketball. I'm from Connecticut. Like I was a diehard UConn fan growing up, and I've kind of like lost that a little bit. You know, I was on the floor for 2 of their national titles. I was in the locker room talking to Kemba Walker and Shabazz Napier after they won national titles. Like you can't really top that as a sports fan, but this is still like my best memories are watching like Georgetown and UConn play in the 1996 Big East tournament title game. Remember that Allen Iverson against Ray Allen game?
Yeah.
You know, so bringing back those traditional rivalries is just, it's good for the sport. No one needs to see UConn playing Cincinnati. They want to see UConn playing Georgetown. They want to see UConn playing Providence. And they want to see UConn and St. John's being rivals again. And look, it's going to be a little bit different because Syracuse isn't there and you know, things like that. But I do think that getting them back in the Big East is the best thing for Big East basketball, the best thing for UConn basketball. And if someone's going to make the argument, yeah, well, let's slit the throat of the UConn football program. You know what? There is not a single person in the state of Connecticut that can call themselves a UConn football fan. I lived there for the first 21 years of my life. I never met a single UConn football fan. Everyone I know is UConn basketball fan.
They had a good year. Didn't they have like one good year like 10 years ago? They made a bowl game.
Yes, bowl. That's it.
Big year.
Beyond that, the best thing they've done is send Dan Orlovsky to ESPN. He's really good when it comes to like breaking down NFL and quarterbacks and all that kind of stuff. But beyond that, like that's nothing.
All right. So how long?
I'll tell you one other person that played football for UConn. Not one, other than Dan Orlovsky.
How long before UConn becomes nationally relevant again? They just haven't been. I've said this for years. UConn fans fought me on it. Then finally, I think they understood that Kevin Ollie was not very good. He wasn't working hard enough in the recruiting trail, like you alluded to. Not a great X's and O's guy. Obviously, he won a national title, but I don't think I've ever seen a coach fall that quickly from winning a national title and, oh, by the way, throwing his name out there that he was withdrawing from the Oklahoma City Thunder search when he was never going to get the job in the first place, to where he was fired, 6 years later and left the program in a totally wrecked state. How long before Danny Hurley gets him back to where they're consistently an NCAA tournament team?
I mean, I think they have a shot at getting back to the tournament this year. I'm not going to sit here and say that I think they are an NCAA tournament team, but I think they have a shot this year. I pose this question. So in the last 6 years, in the AAC, like that's kind of like the worst portion of the UConn basketball program that I think we've seen since Jim Calhoun was there in like the last 3 decades. And the question that I asked was over under in the next 6 years, do you think that they're going to make it to more than 3.5? I set the line at 3.5 NCAA tournaments, and I would take the over. I think that they're close this year. I think they get back next year. And after that, I don't see Danny Hurley coaching a program that's going to slide back to the point that it is basically now or for the last 2 or 3 years. So I think that I don't know if that means they're going to be consistently in the top 25. I don't know if we're talking about competing for Big East titles, but I do think that if you're saying nationally relevant means getting back to the expectation that every year should be an NCAA tournament team, I think that starts this season.
Here's what I like about the Big East as opposed to the AAC is the bottom of the Big East. There's no team in the Big East other than maybe DePaul right now that you can just kind of say like, all right, they don't really have a shot, right? I mean, every other team, Villanova, Marquette, Seton Hall, Georgetown's better. Creighton's been really good even after Doug McDermott left. Xavier should be back this year. St. John's, that's the one that I'm still kind of skeptical about. I'm not going to waste a ton of time on this podcast, but I just think Mike Anderson was the wrong hire for St. John's. He just doesn't fit. Providence, Ed Cooley's going to get Providence back. We know that. Butler, that'll be an interesting one. I think that's the one that I'm kind of not sure whether they can sustain what they have under certainly Brad Stevens and then even Chris Holtman and what he did in his 3 years there. But the Big East is just so much stronger from top to bottom that I think you add a team and you've got 11. I think most years you're going to get 6 of those 11 in the NCAA tournament now. At least. And the thing about it is they're going to play, I believe they're going to play, I don't think this is confirmed yet, but I'm pretty sure it's going to end up being a 20-game schedule with it makes sense.
A full round robin, right?
Right.
And when you play a full round robin against a schedule that's hard, part of the reason that the Big 12 is always ranked so high in the metrics is the same kind of a deal, right? They don't really have there's no bottom that falls out of the conference. There's no like Wake Forest, Georgia Tech, Pitt, and Boston College that everybody has to play. And everyone plays a home and home. So everyone's going to get a shot at beating Kansas at home, just like in the Big East, everyone's going to get a shot at beating Villanova at home. And sometimes all it takes for you to be the difference between on the wrong side of the bubble and on the right side of the bubble is maybe landing 1 or 2 wins against the teams at the top of the conference at home. So I think that's going to also help to lift up some of those metrics and maybe make them look a little bit better kind of from the computer profiles that are so important when it comes to the NCAA tournament. But real quick, I've kind of changed my tune on what I think of Mike Anderson and St. John's. Can I try to convince you on it being a pretty good hire?
Sure. Why not?
Well, maybe not a good hire, but like
not an awful hire.
It kind of makes some sense by thinking outside the box.
All right, let's do this.
So
you're going to go style of play. That's what you're going to try to sell me on.
Yes, it's the style of play, and because there are going to be plenty of kids that you can recruit from New York City to St. John's to play a style that fits the 40 minutes of hell or whatever it is that Mike Anderson is calling that style.
Definitely.
There are plenty of kids in that city that are tough enough, that are going to be athletic enough, that are going to want to come there and just, use that to the best of their ability and play the way that Mike Anderson wants to play. Now, does that mean that St. John's is going to end up being consistently like a top 15 program winning Big East titles? No, I don't think so, but that's not what they were under Chris Mullen. That's not what they were under Steve Lavin. That's not what they've been for.
But if that were the case, Rob, if that were the case, wouldn't Mike Anderson have gotten to more than 3 NCAA tournaments in, 8 years? 8 years at the job that fits him more than ideally. Like perfect. In an SEC, by the way, that sucked early when he got there. Sucked. It was pretty good the last few years. But the first, I would say 4 or 5 years, and oh, by the way, he went to the tournament once in those first 5 years. The SEC was not very good. And that style of play, with athletes in the area, I know what you're saying in New York. They got athletes up and down, whatever. Well, they got plenty of athletes down in SEC country, too. And to me, he didn't live up to the hype, or else he'd still be at Arkansas right now.
Well, let me ask you this. He made it to what, 3 of the last 6 NCAA tournaments with Arkansas?
3 of the last 5, I think. Right? 3 of the
last 5.
3 of the last 5, yeah.
So if St. John's is making it to the NCAA tournament 3 out of every 5 years, that is a pretty significant step up for that program from where they've been over the last decade, the last 15 years.
But again, he was in Arkansas. What I'm trying to say is he couldn't get it done in the perfect place for him, where he had ties, where people knew him, where AU coaches knew and trusted him. If he can get to the tournament 3 out of 5 years at St. John's, I'll be the first one to say I was wrong with this hire. But to me, he doesn't know anybody in New York. It takes a while, as you know, to get in New York and get those guys to know you, to trust you, to give you or to help get you players. Now, his staff, at least he's got a couple New York guys on there. But ultimately, again, I'm not a believer in this hire. And maybe I'll be eating crow at the end of the day. But I thought if you're going to go with somebody, go with somebody with New York ties at the end of the day. It's Paul Hewitt, Mike Anderson. And I'm not saying, I think Porter Moser would have been a train wreck too. I think it would have been a terrible hire. But like a Paul Hewitt who had New York ties.
It came down to Porter Moser, Paul Hewitt, James Jones, and
Porter Moser was out. At that point, Porter Moser was out. It was James Jones, Paul Hewitt, and Mike Anderson. And I think if I'm ranking those 3, I'm probably ranking Mike Anderson last in who I would hire at St. John's.
Yeah, I guess. But I just don't think that there is necessarily like a right or wrong answer when that is what you come down to. Does that make sense? Like we're not talking about
we'll see in 5 years.
Hire Chris Holtman or Mike Anderson. Are you going to hire,
Well, Paul Hewitt's really strong in New York. Really strong. And by the way, he did happen to take a team to the national title game.
Yes, he did.
So he could recruit. And he could recruit at a high level.
Best contract in the history of college basketball.
It was the starting of the rollover. Yeah, no, he started the rollover that a lot of coaches have now. Buzz Williams had it. I don't know if he still has it at Texas A&M. But all right, let's get done with Mike Anderson. We could save that for another day. Before I move on to Florida nabbing Kerry Blackshear Jr., since we were talking UConn, I have to say how excited I am about potentially Kemba Walker coming to Boston here with the Celtics. I have not been a huge fan of the last 2 point guards with the Celtics, Isaiah Thomas, who everybody loved here in Boston. And rightfully so. I mean, listen, he was fun to watch. He played hard. He played with emotion, all that. But I just felt like it was all about Isaiah Thomas at the end of the day, and it fit him. Nobody else could dribble and make a play off the bounce. Brad Stevens just gave him the ball and said, go, and it worked. Then they bring in Kyrie, who's one of the more unlikable people to cover you're ever going to cover. I mean, honestly, Kemba's the anti-Kyrie. He's the anti-Kyrie. Everybody loves him. Great leader, great intangibles, all that. And if the Celtics can get Kemba Walker, I may throw a party just because, again, that locker room will be so much fun to walk in because Kemba's like the everyday guy. I mean, you've covered him. You know Kemba, like always smiling, always happy. The other guy, Kyrie, was about as moody as it got.
Yeah, I really love that fit because when it comes down to it, they're more or less all like Isaiah Thomas, Kyrie, and Kemba are more or less all kind of the same player, right? They're all that small kind of shoot first scoring point guard, which Brad Stevens he's proven having a player like that works for him and works for what he wants to do in the NBA. And it just, when you can add a guy that is going to lift up the rest of that talent around him instead of bringing him down like Kyrie does, I think that it makes too much sense to go out and try to get Kemba Walker and get that thing done. I think it works. I love it.
Yeah,
I love it. And I would not be surprised to see the Celtics end up being one of the teams that bounces back next season.
Because the chemistry will be there with Kemba. That's the thing.
It's so important, man. It's so important to have all those pieces working together. Even in the NBA where everybody's professional,
everybody loves
every
Kemba.
Single day. Imagine that. Imagine going to work every single day and hating like the guy, your boss, hating the guy that you're supposed to be like working for. Imagine going to work and just despising your coworkers, which, that's probably what people were saying when you were at ESPN and at CBS. So you know all about this.
I've had that tag, that label my entire life. So I'm used to it. I'm not worried about it. All right. So huge decision, last night. We're recording this on Thursday, and Wednesday night it popped, that Florida, Mike White lands Kerry Blackshear Jr., arguably the best grad transfer on the market. Blackshear's whole deal was crazy, absolutely crazy. Asked Jeff Borzello, I talked to him yesterday morning, and I told him, watch out for Florida. I just had a feeling, and everything I've been told was Mike White was in a good spot. But you never knew with Blackshear because this is a guy that flip-flopped a half dozen times, whether to stay in the NBA draft, which he wasn't going to be drafted, but to go pro or to go back to college and figure out where he's going to transfer to. Then you heard Kentucky was the leader at one point by a lot of people because it looked to be the right fit, right? I mean, and then you're thinking, well, how could Buzz Williams not keep Kerry Blackshear? He goes to Texas A&M, and Buzz is Buzz. He'll figure out a way. Mike White just kind of went under the radar as Tennessee picked up some steam at the end of the day, but they didn't get him. Then people started saying Virginia Tech, he was going to go back there. I never thought that was a realistic possibility. And Mike White gets him and gets the piece he needed because they got some dudes. They got some really, really good perimeter players, adding Trey Mann and Scotty Lewis, two top, I don't know what Mann's rank, but Scotty Lewis is a top 10 player, 10-ish player, to Andrew Nembhard. So they've got a great perimeter. And now you add that front court guy that is experienced, that you can pencil in, I think, 16, 17, and 8 every single night. And I got Florida now moving them up, Robbie. I'm moving them up all the way to, where do I have them now? I think I have them at 7.
Yeah, I have them at 10.
6.
I think you can make an argument for them to be all the way up to number 5. I don't think that you can rank them above Michigan State, Duke, Kentucky, or Kansas at this point.
Yep, I'm with you.
If you want to say they're above, I don't know, like Louisville or Maryland or Virginia or Villanova, any of those teams, it's a very strong argument to make that they're better than that. And, you said that Kentucky was the perfect fit. I think Florida is actually the fit.
It is. I just felt like Kentucky, he's better than the bigs they have. Like, I'm not saying it's the perfect fit. You're right. Florida and Tennessee were probably better in terms of you go in for him and you play 35 minutes a game. But Kentucky, I think, needed him, I guess would be the better word. Like Kentucky, he could be what I thought Reed Travis was going to be, which is the difference in winning a national title. That didn't happen.
Yeah, but like what Cal's bigs need to be are guys that can, catch at the rim and dunk, and guys that can protect the rim and block shots. And
wouldn't it be nice though if you're him to have a skill guy?
Yeah, it would. But like, have we seen him? I guess Karl Towns was kind of that guy, right? But even Karl Towns was a little bit more of.
But he used him down low. Remember, he used him down low.
But I think what makes Kerry Blackshear so dangerous and where he's best is because of the way that you can use him when you put like 4 players that can shoot around him, which is why I think it makes Florida so dangerous with him there, because they're built an awful lot like that Virginia Tech team was last year, where they're going to be able to put more or less 4 perimeter-oriented guys, whether it's Nembhard, Noah Locke, Scotty Lewis, you said Trey Mann, Keontae Johnson. They got a couple other freshmen coming in. You put those 4 guys around Kerry Blackshear with his ability in screen and rolls and his ability to pull bigs away from the basket and put the ball on the floor. All of a sudden, you have a team that can play 5 out with a bunch of shooters and a bunch of guards that are really, really talented, that can get out and defend you, because Mike White's teams are always going to be able to defend. Suddenly, that team looks really, really good, really dangerous, built the same way that Virginia Tech team was last year. And look, when they had Justin Robinson healthy, Virginia Tech last year was a top 10 basketball team, maybe better than that. They were really, really good. And
imagine if they had Chris Clark last year.
Yeah.
They could have won it all.
They would have been a problem, man. Yep. And look, they still were. They came 1 possession away from beating Duke in the Sweet 16.
Quick break to tell you today's show is brought to you by BetOnline.ag. The NBA season, it's over. Doesn't mean you can't still make money on hoops. You can already bet on who's going to win the 2020 title. The Lakers, the favorite at plus 350, which still surprises me, but it doesn't. Obviously, they got LeBron and AD, and Kyle Kuzma, but we got to see how they fill out their roster. We'll see with all this free agency stuff if that changes and the Lakers are not the favorites when all the dust clears. You can also make custom player bets during games. You can pick a player and a stat and BetOnline.ag. We'll give you a line for it. Crazy. Odds are already out for player props for next year. Zion's points per game set at 18.5. To me, sounds a little bit high. Make sure you go to clnsmedia.com/Goodman. Get a 50% bonus in your deposit of at least $25 when you sign up and use the promo code CLNS50. Don't be left on the sideline with all this excitement going on. Plus, you can play in BetOnline's virtual casino, make some money there too. Whatever you do, make sure you use betonline.ag. Use the promo code CLNS50 for that 50% bonus on your first deposit of at least $25. clnsmedia.com/Goodman. Please see BetOnline's general rules for additional terms and conditions regarding the bonuses. So, why do you hate Memphis, Rob? I mean, you hate Penny Hardaway. Just admit that you dislike Penny Hardaway and Memphis.
So here's my take on Memphis. I understand how talented this recruiting class is, and I understand that they're ranked number 1. And, I had Gary Parrish on my podcast a couple of weeks ago to kind of talk through what the differences between the way that I view Memphis and the way that Memphis fans and Memphis people, and specifically
Gary Parrish. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Homer Parrish? Is that what you called him?
No. Well, no, I didn't call him that, but I think that it fits. But like all the points he said are like, it's logical, right? The number 1 recruiting class almost always ends up as like a number 1 or number 2 seed. If you have 2 top 10 picks on your roster, you almost always end up as like a number 1 or a number 2 seed. And that's what Memphis has. And I get all that. But my thing is that, one, other than James Wiseman and Precious Achiuwa, like most of these freshmen that they have coming in, part of the reason they're the number 1 class is because they have like an 8-man recruiting class where 6 of them are 4 stars. They have these 2 studs, but the rest of the guys that they're bringing in are all more or less going to be kind of like 2, maybe 3-year players. They're not exactly guys that you're expecting to come in and be Cam Reddish to RJ Barrett and Zion Williamson, if that makes sense. They also they have a ton of scoring returning, but these are guys that got their points and got their production because Memphis played at a high tempo and a fast pace and needed somebody to take those shots. I wouldn't exactly call like Alex Lomax and Tyler Harris and Isaiah Maurice players that you are going to pencil in.
No, Harris is the one. Harris is the one guy who I think comes back and still fills a big role.
But what role is he going to play if they're starting Boogie Ellis at the point?
He'll probably come off the bench and score.
Yeah. So my big thing is, it's not that I don't see the talent, and it's not that I don't trust the talent. Look, I got Memphis at plus 5,000 in the future to win the national title. Like, I understand what their ceiling is. I just kind of, with the amount of youth they have on that roster and the fact that they didn't get Rajon Tucker, I think it would have been different if Rajon Tucker was able to get eligible and Memphis was able to take him.
No, there's no bigger Rajon Tucker fan out there than Rob Dauster. I'm convinced by now. Like, you've got Rajon Tucker as like Paul George at this point.
Yeah, he's up there. I think that it goes, like, if we're talking about the best basketball players on the planet, we're going Kawhi Leonard, right? He's probably number one at this point. It would have been a healthy Kevin Durant. Then I think you kind of get into that, like, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, Paul George range. And then it's Rajon Tucker. So he's like at least top 8, top 9 right now.
Yeah, like whoever's bringing him into camp for the summer league, you should put down a ton of money on that summer league team.
I have no idea how he didn't get drafted. It's baffling to me. No, but the big thing with him is, like, I think that his athleticism and ability to space the floor would have worked well with what Memphis wants to do and the fact that they run and all that. I think that he probably would have been the best player on that roster, not named James Wiseman. And I think that, he's the one guy that would have been, like, not 19 years old. They're going to have a bunch of 18 and 19-year-olds, a bunch of freshmen, and it's very difficult to win when you don't have those kind of seniors and upperclassmen and role players. Like, even look at the teams that have actually won a national title going with this, like, one and done freshman route.
Yeah.
Have been the Kentucky team that had Darius Miller and I believe it was Deron Lamb and Terrence Jones, like a bunch of vets on that team. And the Duke team that started Quinn Cook.
And you know what they both had? Their freshmen weren't your typical freshmen, okay? Like Okafor, Jones, those guys, Winslow, they weren't your typical freshmen. They were more mature. And Kentucky, same thing with Kid Gilchrist and Anthony Davis. Like, it was just a different freshman group. Now, I think if this freshman group for Memphis was anything like that group, I'd feel confident. But I'm with you. I don't. Listen, Memphis right now, betonline.ag has Michigan State as a favorite, plus 650, and then 4 teams even at plus 800, Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, and Memphis. I'm with you. I don't have Memphis that high. I have Memphis, I think, in my preseason poll now at like 11 or 12, which is, I think, realistic.
20.
Yeah. I'm right in between. I'm not, I'm not on the wagon like Parrish is. But listen, he's got to be on the wagon. He lives in Memphis, and he should just be happy that they're relevant again because the last however many years they really nobody's cared about him since Calipari left.
And look, I want them to be good. Like if they end up being a top 5 team,
it's good for college hoops.
Program, it's great for college hoops,
right?
Especially if, like, we're talking about Penny out here recruiting with Cal and recruiting with Coach K and recruiting with Bill Self and getting all these same guys. Like, that just makes the sport that much better. So I want them to be good. I'm rooting for them. I have a plus 5,000 future. Like, I'll make like $500 if they end up winning the national title. So Memphis fans, I'm with you. Let's go.
Florida's still, how about this? Florida's still plus 3,300 right now.
All right. So you want to talk about this? Yeah, let's talk about this.
Yeah, we'll go through it a little bit of the ones that stand out. For me, Florida stands out right off the bat at plus 3,300. That's probably your best value currently on the board. Would you?
It's not even close. It's not even close. Like, if you're listening to this right now and you like making money and you want to take a shot at something, go put $20 on Florida at plus 3,300. That basically means if you win $660 for $20 on a team that you're getting at plus 3,300, which should be like that means that they think Florida is what, like a top 18
15
team?
Yeah, 15 team.
That top 15 to 20 team, and like Florida could legitimately be a top 5 team.
Right. So who else you like? Who's the one you like the best right now?
I mean, it's Florida, and it's not even close. There are some places, like, I know that you're a Bet Online podcast, so I'm not going to mention the other names, but there are places that still have Florida at like plus 6,000, 60 to 1 odds. It's crazy. If you can go out and you can bet Florida right now, you should do it. And beyond that, there are probably 4 others that are interesting to me at the Bet Online prices. One of them is Texas Tech.
Yeah.
Just because, like, I trust Chris Beard. He's got a couple of grad transfers coming in again this year. I think Jamius Ramsey is going to be his next like stud, overlooked guy that no one's really talking about, that he turns into a lottery pick. So I'm in on Texas Tech. I think that Seton Hall at plus 5,000 is interesting just because I think they're a borderline top 10 team with Miles Powell.
Well, what if they get the kid from UNLV, which I think they have a shot at, by the way, Shakira Juicner?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, it's Oregon, Grand Canyon, Seton Hall. He's from the north. He's from the Seton Hall area, right? He's from Jersey. I could see him ending up at Seton Hall, and if that's the case, you're right. Like, to me, get Seton Hall now, and if they get him, whoa, because Miles Powell is going to be a potential first-team preseason All-American. I mean, he's going to be that good for that team, and they're just, I just love that group because they understand their roles. They kind of follow his lead, and they're just tough, hard-nosed kids who just play hard and have that chip on their shoulder. So I'm with you. I like Seton Hall there, especially if they get the late edition.
And there's two others that are just kind of flyers, so don't put too much money on it. But LSU at plus 6,600 is interesting just because I think they have a ton of talent.
Who's their point guard, Rob?
Does it matter?
Yes.
Javonte Smart, whatever.
Yes, it matters. They had Tremont Waters last year who just like was their rock, like just knows how to play. I'm never sold on a team to me that doesn't have a high level point guard. I know you're just saying like I didn't put him in the top 25 because of that specifically.
I have them at 18th, 19th now that Florida hopped up above them. But like that's just, let's put it like this. Plus 6,600 is too cheap for them. They should be somewhere around like plus 4,000, plus 5,000, something like that. So if you're looking for value and a good price on a team, LSU is that team. But I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you that they can win a national title. I just think that it's too cheap to be able to get that future. And the other one is Xavier at plus 6,600. Xavier is like a top 15 team for me.
Yep, I'm with you. The one team looking at our preseason rankings that we differ in, well, a couple. You have LSU, you have Auburn, you have Tennessee in there. I don't have any of those three. The one that I have in there, and I screwed up this past year, but I like the coach a lot better this time, is Alabama. I just think they've got really good guards. I think the way Nate Oates plays and gives those guys the freedom, I could see Alabama being a surprise. I'm gonna kind of ride with them again and see if I get it right this time because I think Nate Oates is a better coach than Avery Johnson.
Yeah, I don't think that you're the only person that thinks that. The middle of the SEC is going to be really interesting because I think that I like Tennessee's guards. I wish they got Kerry Blackshear because, again, he would have been a really, really good fit with them. But I like their guards. I think Jordan Bowden and Lamonte Turner are underrated. And I really think that the kid they got coming in, the freshman, what's his name? Josiah James?
Yeah.
I think that
terrific.
He fits.
Yeah.
I think that he really fits because he's kind of like a big playmaking wing, and I think he fits alongside Lamonte Turner and Jordan Bowden well. They don't have like a big guy inside, and that's what they needed. Like I don't know if I trust John Fulkerson or any of these other guys they have. So
admit it, you don't trust them, and you really shouldn't trust them, and that's why to me Tennessee's probably not a top. They're a fringe top 25 team.
I think like 22, something like that.
Yeah, like Auburn, like Alabama. I mean,
I think all those teams, LSU, I think all those teams. The thing about Auburn that's interesting to me is, one, I think Javon McCormick is going to be able to fill Jared Harper's role pretty well. And two,
I don't.
You don't?
No. I just think Harper was that kind of, you knew what you were going to get with Jared Harper. You can't say that about McCormick yet. He's had he's had his flashes. But I watched him during the tournament last year, and again, it was tough to see coming off the bench in that role. Tough to tell, but Harper was a veteran who was a leader.
He was so good in March too.
If he came back, I mean, he's one of those, and we're going to move on here to the NBA draft a little bit. And
one last thing about Auburn, the guy that you got to keep an eye on that's really interesting to me is Isaac Okoro, who I think will be able to play the role that Chuma Okeke played. And I talked with coaches in the SEC last year. Before the Final Four, just to kind of get a scouting report on him. And what they said is that having Okeke out there was so dangerous for Auburn because his ability, one, to make shots, if you put a bigger guy against him. 2, to post up smaller players. And then 3, because of how skilled he was and the fact that, like, look, he's got a torn ACL and he was a number 16 pick. Like, you had to be worried about him every second that he was on the floor. And when you surround a guy that's that good with players like Jared Harper and players like Bryce Brown, you couldn't just focus in on their stars. And I think that Isaac Okoro was a guy that can step in and kind of play that role a little bit. So, like, long story short, LSU, Auburn, Alabama, Tennessee. I think you can even put Arkansas in that conversation.
Maybe, with all their transfers. Yeah.
Yes, and Isaiah Joe. I love Isaiah Joe.
I do too.
Shooters, man. Shooters. You got to love them.
Like, I think Isaiah Joe, if he gains weight, could be a first-round pick at some point. With that size and the ability to shoot it, like, why wouldn't you take him at 27, 28?
It's worth a flyer.
Bobo was not worth a flyer. He fell all the way to...
I felt so bad for him, man. I felt so bad.
I did too. I mean, I did too, obviously, but I think he kind of made his own bed with a lot of this. And I don't think most of it was due to injury. I really don't. I think most of it was due to the fact of all the red flags that have been raised over the years from guys watching him at the McDonald's game where he didn't play and supposedly he could have played. Just kind of bad habits. The question whether he even loves the game. There was just enough around Bobo. And then you factor in the part of, like, if you draft him, where are you going to play him? How are you going to play him? You know, I mean, Dana Altman.
Everyone wants to talk about how good he is defensively, but he's going to get absolutely buried by fives because he has no strength. No. He has the highest hips I've ever seen on a basketball player. He's not going to be able to hold position against anyone. Jeff, you could back him down and post him up and box him out. And he can't, he's got quick feet and he's mobile, like, offensively. But he's not somebody that's going to slide his feet and stay in front of a point guard. And he has absolutely no instincts when it comes to guarding a pick and roll. I know he blocks a lot of shots because he's 7'3" or whatever he is, but he is an absolute liability on the defensive end of the floor and not going to.
He's out of position. Right, because he's out of position all the time.
He doesn't have a position.
Right. Well, you're right. He doesn't have a position. He doesn't always give effort. There were just too many red flags. And again, I feel bad too that he slipped to 44. But I think, honestly, the guys that went ahead of him probably deserve to go ahead of him for the most part.
And the thing is, like, 44 is probably too late just because on the off chance that you were able to get him to figure it out, like, he does have unbelievable ability and a ceiling that's out of this world. But when you combine all of the things that you mentioned about, like, the red flags about whether or not he can guard anyone. Does he love basketball? Does he have a personality to want to get better? Is he going to work? Does he have that drive to be able to reach the maximum of his potential? All those things combined with the fact that he's 7'3" and had a stress fracture in the same bone in his foot that kept Joel Embiid out for 2 years. Put all those things together, man, and it's just, if you took him in the first round, you were asking for trouble.
So, P.J. Washington went 12th. A year ago, most people have P.J., NBA people I talked to, somewhere in like the middle of the second round. So he's kind of the poster child this year for the guy that went back to school, and it worked out because he increased his stock. Not all guys do that. We know that. A lot of them kind of about, even like Rui, right? Rui Hachimura, probably about the same range than he would have won a year ago, maybe a little bit higher. And on the flip side, Daniel Gafford, most people thought he was, he was a first round pick. I don't think he was ever a surefire lottery pick a year ago, but he's probably a first round pick, and he fell out of the first round. So it doesn't work for everybody. But I'm going to ask you, who is this coming year's P.J. Washington? Who's that guy who went back to school who you think has a chance to really increase his stock and become maybe not a lottery pick, but a surefire first rounder?
You're not going to agree with the name that I have.
Yeah.
You ready for this?
I got 4 written down possibilities.
Okay, give me your 4. I want to see if my name's on your list.
Charles Bassey.
I can see that.
Reggie Perry.
I don't love him just because I don't trust
Stansberry.
I don't trust that staff to continue to develop him.
Well, they got 2 guys that are gone on that staff, by the way. His staff's flipped over. But, Charles Bassey.
There's also other things about, like, how there's other concerns that I have about drafting him and whether or not he can reach what his potential is.
Reggie Perry.
I can see that. I actually like him a lot. I think he has a chance to he's the difference maker for that Mississippi State team.
Yep, no doubt. Killian Tilly, if he gets healthy, has the whole full year of being healthy, I think he can get back into the late first round.
I can see it.
And then E.J. Montgomery, who I would put fourth out of those four for me.
E.J. would be number 2 on my list.
Okay.
And I would have Reggie Perry on my list as well. But number 1, are you ready for this?
Who did I miss?
Sitting down?
Did I miss somebody?
No, I will. No, I already know you hate this guy.
Hate this guy.
Mamadi Diakite.
No, I don't. Listen, I can't say I was drinking with him. We were in the same bar. I was down at the top 100 camp, so we were watching Game 6 of the NBA Finals. And we asked for a good spot. It was who? Me, Borzello was there, Steve Forbes was there, Justin Young was there, and then Chris Mack, Luke Murray showed up because we were just trying to find a good place to watch the game after the top 100 camp ended that night. And so we showed up and got there. We got there a little bit earlier, and it became like when we got there early, there was not a lot of people there, and then all of a sudden it became this Virginia bar, like all these Virginia students start showing up, and then Diakite shows up, and so we were talking to him. I was talking to him for a little bit. I don't know what to expect out of him. I just don't know. So it wouldn't shock me because I think his ceiling could be really high. We just don't really know yet.
I think that he's going to end up being the most improved player year over year that we've seen from Tony Bennett since he's been at Virginia. I think one, that's going to be because of opportunity. Obviously, with Ty Jerome, Kyle Guy, and DeAndre Hunter leaving, like someone's going to have to take some shots. And they have absolutely nothing on their perimeter coming back. It's basically Kihei Clark and a bunch of guys that you've never heard of before. It's going to make up their perimeter. 2, I just think that he's going to be one of the best defenders in all of college basketball next season. He can move his feet. He can block shots. He was awesome during the tournament last year. The best basketball he played all season came in March. I think that he's a little bit better with his back to the basket than he gets credit for. And I also think that he has 3-point range. I honestly think that he is going to end up being an All-American caliber player.
Wow.
I have him on a preseason second team All-American list. I think that he is a guy the reason I have Virginia in the top 10 still is because I think Mamadi Diakite is going to end up being awesome next year. I think that he's the guy that takes the biggest leap, and I think we start talking about him as a potential top 20 pick by December. Heard it here first.
So I was in Tony Bennett's office talking to Tony before the top 100 camp started, and we were just talking about a bunch of different things. And one of which I said to him, I said, every year he tells me, every year we talk at the Pete Sam, and he's like, we're not going to be very good. And every year they're really good. So I was joking with him. I'm like, do you know where people have you ranked this year in the preseason? He's like, I don't really look at that stuff. I said, well, most people, I said, I have you about 15. I said, but most people have you ranked around 8 right now. And he looked at me and he's like, 8? I said, yeah, 8. And he's like, all right. And then 15 minutes later, we're talking about something else. And he looks at me, he goes, 8? And I'm like, yeah, 8. So I don't know if he has as much confidence as you do, but they got a lot of holes. They got a lot of things they got to figure out with this team. I mean, they didn't plan on losing Ty Jerome and Kyle Guy, this early. Both of them, maybe one of them, but not both. And I think it's going to take a mammoth coaching job for Tony Bennett, who, oh, by the way, I'm doing the Pac-12 chain of command right now, which, as you know, is ranking the best jobs to the worst job in every league. And it really is amazing when you think about what that dude did, not only what he's done at Virginia, what he did at Washington State. I mean, that is by far the worst job in the Pac-12, and one of the worst jobs. You could make a case it's the worst BCS or Power 6, whatever you want to call it, job in the country. And that dude
what else would even be in the conversation with it for the worst BCS job?
I don't know. I'm trying to think of what else is that bad. What other job is at that level of crappiness? Because, it's at the way bottom of the Pac-12, which kind of stinks right now. What's, the worst job?
At the bottom of the Pac-12, and you're recruiting recruiting against schools that are in Seattle and that are in LA and that are in Tucson and that are in Berkeley and Palo Alto. You know, like what are you going to get to Pullman, Washington?
I mean, Boston College is the worst job in the ACC, and BC is way better than Washington State.
Yeah, 'cause at least you have 1 year in the city of Boston, which, I mean, some people love it, some people hate it. But
it's the city of champions, Robert.
Yeah, it's the city, it's Boston. And you have all those prep schools around you, so you're going to at least have, like, somewhere to recruit from. How often are you going to find guys that are, like, that caliber of player?
And you're not beating Gonzaga for them.
Yeah, like, Pullman is basically Idaho. Like, that's basically where you are.
It is.
So unless, like, you can find 7 Adam Morrisons hiding out in Eastern Washington somewhere, like, there's no recruiting base there.
All right.
So what else is in the conversation? Give me some others.
Yeah, I don't really have them. I mean, honestly, I don't really, like, the worst job in the Big East is probably DePaul. DePaul's way better. Not even close. You know, maybe in the Big Ten, can you find what the bottom of it, Rutgers?
Rutgers, maybe, but at least Rutgers, like,
they got players.
You have a base,
right?
Rutgers would actually be pretty good this year if they hadn't lost the Amarori kid.
Yeah. I just don't. I don't think there's even. And maybe I'll do this once I do all the chain of commands. I might put something together and try to rank every program in the country. It'd be a brutal task, but at least I have like that kind of template to go by with every league. But then putting them, you know, you're kind of throwing darts from there to some degree of trying to figure it out.
Tier them. Don't rank like the top 50 and then just do tiers of everything else. I might do that. But
Tony Bennett, I mean, just the job he's done, it's incredible. All right, we got to get out. One last thing. We'll do the flip side of the guy you know think is going to be the next PJ Washington. We're going to do the guy that should have come back. The guy that I have one name that I wish he had come back, and he didn't, and he went undrafted, and I hope we hear from him again, but I think with another year, he could have been a locked first rounder.
So here's my thing on this, and it's really hard for me to judge kids on whether or not they get drafted, because a lot of these like second round picks will tell teams they don't want to be picked because they want to like go the Fred VanVleet route and find the best situation for
the agents will tell the teams.
Yeah, the kids won't. Well, the agents will because of what the kids.
Yeah.
Like the agents are working for the kids, but you know what I'm saying. So they'll mostly say like, look, we don't draft us. We want to go out and find the right situation. Like we're going to try to figure this out. Like so, guys like maybe Naz Reid and guys like Luguentz Dort and maybe like a Louis King. From what I've heard is they were in this situation where they probably would have been drafted if their camp would have told people that they wanted to be drafted. Does that make sense? So it's hard for me to judge someone strictly based on whether or not they got drafted, if they made the right decision, especially if we're talking about potential second round picks. The other part of it is I understand.
Can you just give me a damn name?
No, last thing. I want to make one more point. And the other thing about it is like I understand why a kid, if he's getting the correct information, would make the decision like, look, I only have 10 years of playing basketball at this level left. I don't want to take away 10% of my earning potential by coming back to school when I can go pro, even if it means I'm making $120,000 playing second tier in Romania or whatever it would end up being. So I think that as long as you're making a decision with all the information, then it's hard for me to like just judge somebody whether or not they made the wrong decision. Now that said,
take out all those factors for now. Take out all those factors and just give me the guy who, in your opinion, who if he had come back, he would have had a big year. He would have been able to really kind of improve and put himself in a position to get a guaranteed 3-year deal worth millions.
Louis King.
Yeah, I'm with you on him. My guy is Lou Dort. I love him. I love his game. I love how hard he plays. I watch Marcus Smart all the time, and I think he can be very similar player to Marcus Smart at the end of the day. And I think he'll make a team and find a way to stick and be on a roster. But I just think he might have cost himself some money. We'll see. I hope I'm wrong. But yeah, Louis King, Lou Dort, two Lou's. I'm with you on both. All right, listen, thanks for joining me. Prayers out, by the way, to Howard Moore, Wisconsin assistant who's back in the hospital. we don't have a lot of information there, but obviously has gone through a ton after that car crash that claimed his wife and daughter a month or so ago, and really hope he's okay. One of the best human beings that you will ever meet. So hope Howard gets better. And thanks, Rob, for joining me, and have a good summer. Hopefully I don't see you until the PCM, and when I do see you, I'll be coming back from a pretty good vacation with my family to overseas. So please don't call me in the next 10 days.
Where are you going overseas?
We're starting in Portugal. Then we're going to Barcelona, which my wife and I have been to. My daughter has not. And then we're going to Amsterdam.
Barcelona might be my favorite city on the planet. I got some good restaurant recommendations for you.
Right.
The best meal I've ever had was at this little hole in the wall in right off of, what's that main drag in Barcelona called? I'm blanking on the name now.
I forget the name, but it's awesome.
Right off Las Ramblas,
yep.
like a quarter mile away, like kind of back down an alley is a place called Sarah 23, which was the best meal I've ever had in my entire life. It's
Sarah 23?
CERA 23. Write that down. Anyone in Barcelona, you have to go there. You have to check it out. Make reservations early because it's really hard to get in the door. But it was the best meal I've ever had. We're going to Europe this summer too.
Where are you going?
Amalfi Coast.
Oh, the best. Talk about it. A great place to go. Like the Amalfi Coast is probably, I mean, to me it's hard because every time we go away, and the great part is, listen, you know, we get the Marriott points and the miles, so vacations are cheap, but I always want to go to Italy. Like, it's hard for me because I always want to go to Italy, but then you're on let's go to some other places that we've never been, because you never know if you'll get that opportunity again. But man, the Amalfi Coast is as good as it gets. Food, I mean, I'm already overweight right now. Like, I've already put on like 7 or 8 pounds since the national title game, and I'm in trouble now. Like, I'm gonna be a fat.
You put on weight since the season ended?
Yeah,
I've lost some LP since the season ended, but March was bad for me, dude, because one, I had a newborn, and two, it was like March Madness. I think I worked out once between like March 1st and about like April 15th.
Oh, yeah.
I went from like being kind of fat to being like way too fat. So I've shed some of that a little bit. I'm back into respectable shape.
Yeah, I started cutting down on the Dunkin' Donuts iced coffees. I started to cut back on that. I figured that was probably a thing to do here. So I'm gonna cut back on those, caffeine, some of that stuff, and see if I can at least lose a few pounds before we leave, over the weekend. So, listen, thanks. I'll see you in Augusta, at the Peach Jam, and, that's about it.